Hi everyone, and welcome to this month's big tutorial part 1. And it's the first wildlife month which I've been really looking forward to. Some of you have been asking to see my palette a little more clearly, so that's what I'm starting with. Here you can see my pastels cleaned up at the end of the painting, and you'll notice that I've laid them out organised from light to dark, and also in groups of warm and cool colours. Now the hair was really tricky because most of it is in shadow, and you'll see that the only light really is reflecting off the back of the hair, so I wanted to use these bright highlight colours in those areas, and I still needed some warmth in the parts of the hair in shadow, so I used the more dull oranges and even some red in the shadows too to add some vibrance. The cooler highlights come from my Blue Violet 7 and some light green tints as well. I avoid blue as much as possible in this piece, but that is largely to do with my background, which is extremely warm. I wanted this painting to have a really warm glow to it. But whatever background you choose to do, and I encourage you to experiment, you'll want to use some of those colours from the background within your hair. So I make a start on the hair, and as always, the first thing I'm looking to do is get some of those dark tones down first. Build up the depth and the darkness before adding any highlight colours. And quite often I start off with this black Faber-Castell stick, and I'm really just blocking in some areas in the ears, which I do a few jump cuts through this as it's quite boring just to watch me do the whole thing. I'm really trying to find the darkness inside the ear, and I'm not leaning very heavily, just rubbing it on quite lightly and, as always, blending that into the paper. I'm using Hahnemuhl's light yellow velour paper for this project, but as always you can try out some different pastel papers. I recommend to go for a light or mid-tone paper for this project. I'm just starting a small hair study on pastel mat, so that's going to be coming very soon. It will be interesting to compare how easy it was to get the softness of the hair and the fur on both papers. And I just continue with small marks using the black stick, and it's very loose at the moment, but I am already trying to see the flow of the fur, how it curves up the nose, and there's so many different directions of fur on hair, so at this stage I'm just trying to note all the little turns and lay in some of that dark base coat. So at this point I pick up some Red Earth 18, and now I'm just starting to add in some of the warmth inside the ear. When I'm working on the ears, usually I don't have a very clear idea of the palette yet. A lot of it is trial and error. There are so many colours within the fur, and because I'm putting a different background in my piece, I'm trying to think of ways that I can use some of the colours that I've used in the background within the fur of the hair. And you'll see that as I work along, trying to use colours that will tie this hair well into my background of buttercups. So at this early stage, I pick up a little bit of grey 27, and I just want to give myself the nice bright outline of this ear. just where the hair really catches the light. So although it's early days to be adding any kind of highlight colour, I don't want any dark colours going on this area. These little highlights down the left side of the hair really will be the brightest areas in the whole painting, so I want to make sure that they really sing out. And this just gives me a better idea of the outline of the ear. So I bring in some brown earth mine, just trying to find some of the lighter tones within the ear, and blending that softly into the black underneath. I tend to jump around a little when I'm working on fur like this, especially in the beginning. I'm still figuring out what colours to use, and I always feel better when I get the ears done, as it gives me a good bit of my palette for the fur of the hair. And you'll see me use quite a lot of the pastel pencil in this project. Here I'm just trying to flick some of the little edges out, make the edges of the ears really feathery and soft. And this works really well against a blurred background like this. You can make the detail in the hair so crisp, and it really helps that 3D effect. So I'm back in with some BE9, and I'm going to try and work this ear up a little. Just dotting in some bits of colour inside the ear, always trying to find a sharper edge on the blunt pastels. Just keep turning your pastel, find those small edges. And always blending into the paper as well. It's so important on the velour. If you don't rub in your layers, you'll find that you'll get a lot of pastel sitting on the surface of the paper, which is bad for many reasons. Here I'm using some Natural Earth 3. Little bits of brown at this early stage, just trying to block in some texture and colour. And now with some yellow 17, just trying to pick out some of the lighter hairs up this right side of the ear. And it's tricky on this scale. This is quite small. The head of the hair is a good bit smaller than my hand, which you can see. So it's tricky to get the small detail on velour. My first layers, I'm not too bothered if they're very neat. You'll see that I can use the pastel pencil quite a lot to neaten it all later. And now some grey 25 to try and add some of those lighter hairs at the ends. I like this colour. It's one of the light grey tints, but it has a little hint of green to it. And you'll see that I use some of the colours that have a little hint of green in them in the shadow areas, so on the brightest fur on the hair, in the shadow areas, I'm trying to not use my really zingy yellows and bright colours. And it's good to use some green tints in the shadow areas. There's so much green in the background, and a lot of what's in the background will always get reflected off your main subject. And already now I'm making use of some yellow 15 from the background to add some of the smaller flecks of fur inside the ear. And you'll see me use quite a lot of vibrant colours in the fur. And try and play around with what vibrant colours you can put into your hair. Try and choose some reds and oranges, bright primary colours that maybe you wouldn't normally associate with putting on an animal. And this is another piece of grey 25. Even with these bigger chunky pieces of pastel, you can always find a little edge there. And don't worry if you put it on and it's not quite right. It's impossible to be completely accurate when you can barely see where the pastel is hitting the paper. Just take your time, and then you can come back through with the pastel pencil and add the texture back into it. And now a colour that I use a lot of in this project is Brown Earth 27. It's a really good mid-tone brown, and it's also got quite a lot of green in it, so it's not very much red content. And I make use of this colour in particular in a lot of the shadow areas on the hair. So anywhere that I want to avoid putting the brighter oranges where there's sunlight hitting, this seemed to be the colour that I used a lot of. And now with some of my grey 27, I start to find the outline, or the highlighted outline, of the second ear. Just dotting little bits of that highlight up towards the top of the ear. And I'll want to feather this softly into the rest of the ear, but right now I'm just trying to find that outline. And using a little bit of that Brown Earth 9 on the top of the ear. And now I add some warmth into those dark tones. I often use the black to put down my first layer, but black can be very harsh. But you do need that depth of colour in there in some areas. But then I do like to come back through with warmer tones like this Red Earth 18 and pick out some of the warmth up the ear. And now up this right side of the right ear, I make use of some BV7 for the first time. As I said, I wanted to avoid using any cold colours, very cold colours in this piece, as I really want the hair to glow as if it's sitting amongst all of those warm buttercups. But I did make use of some of that icy BV7 in some areas, just where it's extremely in shadow or catching a bit of cool light on the shadow side. So a mixture of BV7 and my grey 25, which has a little more green in it. And I'm just dragging those marks out over my background. If you've got your background done already and you've blended it really well into the paper, it creates a really good surface for adding these soft marks out on top of. On velour and all pastel papers really, they work best when you get a few layers of pastel down. You get a much smoother, softer mark. So by having your background really nicely blended behind these areas, makes it easy to come along with a sharp piece of pastel or the tip of the pastel pencil and drag those little hairs out over the background. And this is yellow 6 now, starting to bring in some of those highlights down the top of the ear. And that earlier highlight of grey 27 that I put on, now I'm just trying to feather that around the edge of the ear so it's not quite so harsh a highlight. And with some grey 25 again now, just coming down onto the top of the head, picking out where that highlighted area is. And I'll come back over this later with a lighter colour as it's really quite bright in there. But for now I'm just trying to get some of the textures down. And I can come back later and strengthen highlights. But already the two ears start to look a little 3D. And now some of my yellow 15 again, just up this side of the ear that's catching the light. And then I continue adding some warmth with that Red Earth 18. You can see that I don't build up the fur in 1, 2 or even 3 layers. It often takes multiple layers of small marks coming back in and redefining, even coming back in with the black always, redefining that texture. So if you notice your colours start to all mix together and get muddy on the paper, you can always use harder pastel or the pastel pencil to come back in and refine that texture. Now a little more work at this highlight down the right ear. And I use little bits of white, sometimes grey 27, just to lightly dot some little marks down and find the outline of this ear that's catching the light. And the same on the other side where the light's catching, I'm constantly going back there and strengthening that highlight throughout the painting. Here it's a little bit of grey 25. Continuing that highlight on down the ear. Often when I'm applying some dark pastel over a lighter background, it's very easy to dirty the colours in the background around the edges of the subject. So I'm showing you here how I can come back in at a particular point of the outline of the hair, and I can just really add to the contrast between the dark and the light in the background here. Sometimes just make use of my left hand a little if I really need to be sure of not going over any of the dark ear. And moving on down onto the face, this is some BE9 here, just starting to add some texture down the side of the face where the sunlight's catching it. I'm always looking to have good contrast between the background and where it meets the subject. So you can see up there in the dark part of the ear, it stands out really well against all that light yellow. And sometimes in places where I have a highlight on the edge of the ear, so the white areas, you can see it stands out really well against the bits of the background where there's a little more darkness. So I'm always trying to make every edge of the animal really pop out from the background. And you can tweak at that as you work on the main subject. And now using some BE6 on the areas of the hair where it's mainly in sunlight, I do try to limit the use of black there, and the next best thing is this dark brown BE6. And I use it to create a lot of the texture on the lightest parts of the hair. But it's a great brown colour, also found in the animal set if you have this. I use it in a lot of my work. It's a lovely, dark, rich brown. And it has a lot of warmth to it as well. Great colour in a lot of different furs. And a little bit of white now, just bringing this ear on down to where it actually meets the hare's head. And some brown earth 13, just to continue on down the left side of the hare's face. Natural earth 3 is another little colour I make use of quite a lot in this piece. Just a good mid-tone orangey brown. And some brown earth 27 again, and I use this to start and pick out some of the lighter textures of the fur. This is a good mid-tone, something that I can come back and add highlights to or make it darker. And it helps me just to get a feel for the direction of the fur as I start to fill in some of the face. But I keep stopping the work with any mid-tones or highlight colours, always making sure that I've got enough of those dark tones down first, like with my Brown Earth 6 here. And here I make use of the brown pastel pencil from Faber-Castell, and it helps me to continue the forehead on down to where it meets the eyebrow. And again here I can use my light yellows from the background. This is some yellow 5. And I can just tweak the outline of the hair and at the same time really sharpen the contrast between the background and the hair. You can see how it already helps the hair stand out more just by doing that. And with some of the grey 25, I'm just trying to find the outline for his furthest away cheeks. Really, it might have been better if I had a little area of darkness in the background behind this. And I do come back in and try and heighten that contrast a little as I realise it's going to be difficult to make the shadow side of his muzzle really stand out. So just subtly blending a little bit of darker colour in. All the time helping those highlights to stand out from the background. And I can also make use of this tool. It's just a paper stump or tortillon. And when my fingers are too blunt and big for the job, I can use the point of one of these to sometimes lean quite heavily and really score an edge in there. And it really helps to create that contrast between the background and the foreground. I use it quite a lot when I'm working on flowers and trying to find a very definite outline. You can always use the paper tortillon to come back and rub away the lighter colours and reveal colours underneath. You can mix colours with it on the paper. It's quite a useful little tool. And now I'm just using the black here again to work on the bottom half of the face, starting to build up the first layers of texture and adding that depth. And some natural earth 3 here just to fill in some of the muzzle and bring some of that warm tone up through the rest of the face. I often work from the top of the face down as it gives me somewhere to lean my hand while I work. I can often even lean on a bit of my background as it's really well blended into the paper, and as long as I lean lightly it doesn't do any harm to it. So you can always find a way. And now starting with my grey 25, I spend the next few moments working on this eye that's farthest away from us. And this angle is always so tricky, so just pay particular attention to the angle of your lines on this side of the hair, as it's very deceiving. Getting that 3/4 view is tricky with a hare's shape of skull. I use quite a lot of the pastel pencils on these edges and also some little tiny shards of brown earth 13. But the pastel pencils do come in very useful on this scale of a painting. Perhaps if you're following along, you might consider making your hair a little bigger or doing a small study of just his face. And if you do that, I would advise to make the hare's face a little bigger than how I'm working, as that will make your life a lot easier. And with the black pastel pencil, I'm just starting to mark in where the eyeball disappears around the side of his face. We can only see a very small amount of his eyeball, but I have to be careful to get it in the right place at the right angle. And I'll come back later on and add a highlight onto this. I don't think I'll go into a lot of detail on the eyes in this tutorial, as there's a lot to get through with the fur. Also, at the moment, I'm filming my other hair demo, which is a close-up of a hare's face. So I'm thinking that I'll make a good detailed eye tutorial from that one. And picking up some yellow 16 now. Yet another lively yellow from the background. I'm just adding more texture, especially down the sunlit areas of the hair. Coming in with a little bit of BE9 and later some vivid red 9, starting to add some more mid-tones down the front of the face. And you'll see me go back and forth between the mid-tones and the dark tones as I build up the texture, but try to keep those refined hairs that are starting to appear. And I pick up many colours, dotted in a few places. It makes life pretty difficult when editing, when I'm painting fur like this, as I seem to jump from one colour to another, but I think that's part of the key of building up convincingly thick, soft fur. It's many, many layers, lots of colours, and all softly blended in together. This is BE13, and I start to think about some of the lighter values on the face of the hair. So you can see this lovely rim of light coloured fur around the hare's eye. And the shape of it is quite important as it really frames the hare's eye and gives the eyebrow some expression. I often find hares look a bit stern or serious, so I always like to try and soften their expression a little. Sometimes the photo reference makes them look a little cross, and I like to find good photo reference where the hair does look like it has a nice soft expression. I love this one that looks like it has just spotted us, maybe just about to run away. And this is with the grey 25, just bringing in some of the lighter hairs that separate the nose area from the cheek. Then I continue up the nose with Brown Earth 27, trying to convincingly create the direction of the fur, how it meets in the middle of the nose, leaving a little dark ridge down the center of the face. So all those little observations, trying to make each section of fur follow the pattern and the swirls, how it does on the hare's face. With some Browner 13, you can see it's a tiny little shard, great for these smaller marks as I come up the layers. I start to pick out some of the highlighted hairs on the top of the head. Again, these are still in shadow, which is why I'm using quite a dull colour over here. Using some BV7 now, there's just a lovely little cool ridge of fur along this left eyebrow. And you can see how those marks soften into the pastel that I've already laid down. Then I can come back in with the pastel pencil, tweak at that, and shape it. But it's never really a case of putting something down one time and that's it done. It's about coming back later and tweaking those areas. And you'll see me do this many times across the hare's face. A bit of a closer view now, and you can see exactly what I'm doing with the black pastel pencil, just to redefine some of those hairs. Inevitably, when you work with the bigger sticks, you'll end up covering over some of your dark layers underneath. And here I'm just going back through the fur, trying to find some of those gaps, make sure that contrast is nice and crisp between the top light hairs and those dark gaps in between. So it's really important, it's always really important, especially in fur, if you want to create that realistic 3D pop effect. Your fur really needs to have that depth in there before any of your light colours. It's something that I say all the time, but at the same time it's something that I see all the time in people who are learning, just not going dark enough in the early layers, not trusting that a good pastel paper allows you to add your lighter colours on top. Some RE18, again adding back in the warmth to the fur. Now a little bit of Natural Earth 8 for underneath the mouth, and back in with some BE6. Under this area of the chin, I'm going to have some yellowy green tints, reflecting that light off the flowers around the hair. But as with everywhere else on the hair, I have to get those dark marks in first. And as the fur gets closer to the nose, it gets shorter. So on the nose, I'm literally making little dots. And this is my grey 25 again, having another go at outlining this cheek farthest away from us. And another quick go over with the black pastel pencil, working a little more on this eyebrow farthest away from us. And again adding a little more texture back into the rest of the face, just before coming back in with some lighter highlights to start picking out the tops of the light hairs. And now with my Brown Earth 27, I start to pick out some of that ridge that comes across from the top of the eyebrow over to that middle point down the face. And even with the big pastel stick like this, I can find lots of little edges to make the tiniest of marks, each time angling the end of the pastel so that I make the mark in the right direction. On Natural Earth 3 here, followed by the black Faber-Castell again. Each time I come to do some of the highlight hairs, I realise that I don't quite have enough of the dark fur in below. So I keep coming back, making it a little darker. It is tricky. I don't want to go too light too soon, or I will lose the whole effect. Now with Brown Earth 13, I start to pick out some of that cheek that's catching the light. Of course, there will be lighter highlights on this area, but I use some of my duller colours first of all before committing to the really bright highlights. And now with some grey 27, I start to pick out some of the brightest area on that cheek catching the light. And this looks very bright when I add the marks on, and then I nicely blend that into the colours underneath. But this cheek is very prominent on the face, and it will be somewhere that I use my brightest highlights on. And again, coming in with the pastel pencil, I can neaten what I've just put down. Picking up the Brown Earth 27 again, continuing that eyebrow round the left side of the eye. It's just all about noticing the anatomy of the animal that you're painting, making sure that each piece of fur aligns with the ridges, showing the muscles and the structure of the animal underneath. So the direction of your fur and where you put these prominent areas really matters for the overall realism of the animal. I'm back in with a few dots of that lovely yellow 15, one of my favourite colours. With some grey 27, just strengthening that highlight down the left side and tweaking the shape of the ear as it joins to the head. And now Yellow-Green Earth 15, which you'll see me use quite a lot in the fur, especially in the places that are in shade. So just bringing in little hints of green throughout the fur will really help with both the light and the shade effect, as well as tying it into that background that has quite a lot of green in it. And all the time I'm paying close attention to the direction of the fur and moving the pastel around in my fingers to be able to make that mark. And a little bit of my BV7 now, just to start and pick out this left side of the muzzle area. And little bits of Brown Earth 13 now, starting to pick out some more highlighted areas. And that's us approaching the end of the first part, the first hour. There will be another couple of parts so that you can follow my entire progress on both the face and body of the hare. Hopefully I can show you as much as possible on this one. I know a lot of you have been looking forward to some wildlife. So good luck in your own hare projects, and I'll see you for part 2.